What happens when the man who signs the paychecks puts on an apron and realizes his team is drowning without him? Aidan Ashford stepped out of his rental car and looked up at the red brick-fast casual restaurant. It was the 12th location he'd opened since buying the small chain 6 years ago. 19 total now. On paper, business was steady, but something didn't sit right. Customer reviews for this spot had nosedived in the past 3 months. Late orders, rude staff, food served cold. He'd heard the district manager blame staffing issues, but that excuse was wearing thin. So Aidan decided to go see for himself. He hadn't met this restaurant's crew face to face. Being a corporate chain with decentralized hiring, store managers made their own staffing decisions. Most employees had no clue what the owner even looked like, and Aidan liked it that way. Today, he wore a baggy kitchen tee, a backward cap, fake glasses, and even grew out a scruffy beard for the disguise. He signed in as Adam, a new kitchen trainee transferred from another city location. The manager, a wiry guy named Mitch, barely looked up from his clipboard. "You're the transfer." "Good, we're screwed on prep. Go see Dan at the line, he'll show you the ropes." Dan was the kitchen lead, mid-30s, built like a linebacker and carried himself like he owned the place. He didn't smile, didn't even say hi. "You know how to dice onions or not?" Dan barked, tossing a cutting board onto the prep table. "Yeah, I've done some prep before," Aidan said quietly, settling in beside a younger girl who looked like she couldn't be more than 19. "You're slow," Dan snapped at her. "You've been here 3 weeks and still can't keep up." She flinched, eyes locked on the carrots she was peeling. Aidan caught her name on the schedule taped nearby. Paula Finch. Dan turned to Aidan. "You, take over her station." "We don't have time to babysit." Aidan glanced at Paula, her face flushed, lips pressed tight. She stepped aside without a word. "You okay?" Aidan asked softly as she gathered her things. "I'm fine," she muttered, but her hands trembled. The kitchen was chaos. Orders flew in non-stop, and Dan shouted over everything, flipping tickets, slamming pans, berating anyone who wasn't moving at his pace. Twice, he grabbed plates out of people's hands and replated them himself, muttering curses under his breath. At one point, Paula returned to help with dishwashing. Aidan watched her scrub pans while fighting back tears. Dan noticed. "You crying? Jesus, Paula, maybe go work at a cupcake shop if you can't handle real heat." That was it. Aidan's jaw clenched, his hands tightened around the knife. He forced himself to stay in character. He took his break outside to cool off. Mitch came out a few minutes later, lighting a cigarette. "Your kitchen lead, Dan, he's pretty intense." Mitch rolled his eyes. "He gets it done. We're short 3 people, man." "No one wants to work anymore." "Why are you short? 2 quit, 1 on leave." "Paula should have been fired weeks ago, but corporate keeps pushing this give them a chance stuff. I need results." Aidan stared at him. "So you let Dan run the show, he keeps us moving." "Customers don't care how we treat newbies, they want their food hot and fast." Inside, the shouting picked up again. Aidan walked back in just in time to hear Dan explode. "Move, Paula, you're costing us orders." She dropped a tray of silverware. It clattered across the floor. "I said move," Dan screamed, slamming his palm on the prep table. Everyone froze. Aidan stepped forward. "Back off." Dan spun toward him. "You got a problem, new guy?" Aidan narrowed his eyes. "Yeah, I do." Dan took a step closer, but Mitch jumped in. Whoa, take a breath. Adam's new. He doesn't know how we do things." "I know enough to see you're driving people into the ground," Aidan said, voice low. Paula stood frozen, eyes wide, her hands shaking again. Dan scoffed. "You're siding with her. She's been dragging us down since day one." Aidan stepped back, heart pounding. He couldn't blow the cover yet, not in the middle of the shift. But something had to give. He helped Paula clean up the silverware in silence. After the rush, he caught her outside behind the restaurant. "You shouldn't let him talk to you like that." She gave a sad smile. "They all do." "You get used to it." "That's not okay. I need the job. I'm saving for school." Aidan nodded slowly. "You're doing your best. I've seen it." She blinked hard, as if no one had ever said that to her before. That night, Aidan went back to his hotel room and stared at the ceiling. He'd built this company to give people a second chance, a place to grow. What the hell happened? He opened his notebook and started writing names: Dan, Mitch, Paula. Tomorrow he'd pull the curtain, but first he needed to see how deep the damage went. Aidan arrived before sunrise the next morning, tying his apron behind the prep counter as the first delivery truck rolled up. The back door creaked open slowly, and a kid in a faded hoodie barely old enough to pass for 20 dragged a dolly stacked with produce inside. No greeting, no clipboard, no manager in sight. Aidan stepped forward. "You with the supplier?" The kid gave a half nod. "Frozen trucks late. This is just dry and veg." Aidan glanced around. No one else was helping unload, though the schedule clearly showed 2 morning shifts had started. He signed the delivery sheet using the name Adam and started hauling boxes inside himself. It took over 20 minutes, with no assistance from Mitch or Dan. By the time the prep line was fully stocked, Paula walked in, eyes still puffy. She didn't speak, just slipped on gloves and started peeling sweet potatoes. Her back was hunched, movements mechanical. Aidan worked beside her in silence until a new voice cut through the kitchen. "You the transfer guy?" It was a woman, maybe 40, wearing the company's red polo but with a name tag that only read Marcy. Her tone carried no warmth, but her expression was less hostile than Dan's had been. "I'm Adam. Just started yesterday." "Great. Try to keep your head down." "Dan's not a morning person." Aidan raised an eyebrow. "He always like that?" Marcy didn't answer right away. She adjusted the timer on the convection oven, then said, "There's worse things than yelling, at least he works." She didn't elaborate, just moved on to checking fridge temps. Aidan noticed she skipped over the walk-in entirely. Once the doors opened to customers, the pace changed instantly. The front counter buzzed with orders and the kitchen kicked into high gear. Dan showed up 15 minutes late, clearly unbothered. He didn't apologize, didn't explain. Just threw on gloves and started barking instructions. "Marcy, get those chicken skewers flipped." "Adam, no, not like that. Thinner slices." "Jesus." He ripped a knife from Aidan's hand, sliced 3 pieces in rapid succession, then tossed the blade back. Paula flinched when he passed behind her. When the lunch rush hit, the kitchen strained. Tickets started stacking. Aidan moved between stations, filling in where he could. He noticed the fryer light blinking, signaling it hadn't reached temp. He flagged Marcy. "That fryer's not ready." "You want me to hold the fries?" She looked at the screen. "We don't have time. Drop the first batch anyway." "But do it." Aidan hesitated, then stepped back. "Not safe. I'll prep new oil instead." She didn't argue, but he saw her roll her eyes as she walked away. Dan stormed over seconds later, holding a plate. "This is raw in the middle." He shoved the grilled chicken forward. "You running a hospital kitchen now?" Aidan didn't respond. He turned to redo the order when Paula's voice cracked behind them. "I didn't cook that one." Dan turned on her. "Then what the hell are you doing here? Just breathing up space?" She froze. Her lip trembled. That was enough. Aidan dropped his tongs and stepped forward. "Back off." Dan squared up. "You got something to say, say it." "Yeah, you're not a leader, you're a liability," Dan scoffed. "You don't know how we run this place." "No, I know exactly how you run it, like a tyrant." Mitch stepped in from the office hallway, coffee in hand, oblivious to the tension. "Everything good?" Dan turned to him. New guys running his mouth. Mitch looked at Aidan, then at Paula. His face flickered, then settled. "Let's all cool off." "No," Aidan said calmly. "You're the manager, right? Then manage." Mitch shifted uncomfortably. "Look, we're all under pressure. Let's not make it personal." It became personal the moment your lead cook decided screaming was normal. Dan laughed. "This guy's soft." "He's right," Paula said suddenly. Her voice was quiet but firm. "You treat everyone like garbage." Silence fell. Mitch looked like someone had unplugged him. Dan's face twisted. "Pack your things," Aidan said, voice even. Dan turned. "What?" I said. "You're done. Go." Dan barked a laugh. "You're a trainee. You don't get to fire me." Aidan pulled off the backward cap, removed the glasses, and looked him dead in the eye. "My name is Aidan Ashford. I own this company." The room went still. Even the clatter from the dish pit stopped. Paula's hand flew to her mouth. Marcy froze in place, still holding a tray of rolls. Mitch's coffee slipped slightly in his hand. Your wait. What? I came here to find out why this location's been bleeding staff and dragging our name through the mud. I found my answer. Dan stared, stunned. You're done, Aidan said again. Out, now. Dan didn't argue this time. He ripped off his apron and stormed out the back door. Aidan turned to Mitch. Office, now. They stepped inside the cramped back room. Aidan closed the door behind them. You let that go on this long, Mitch stumbled through his words. It's been hard filling shifts. Dan's rough, but he kept things together. You think that excuses degrading people? No, but there's no but you empowered him. You looked the other way. I didn't know it was that bad. That's because you weren't paying attention. Mitch rubbed his temple. Look, I've been trying to keep the place from falling apart. Then you should have asked for support. Instead, you let a toxic cook run the kitchen while new hires quit weekly. You're suspended, effective immediately. HR will follow up. Mitch didn't argue. He just slumped into the office chair, defeated. Aidan walked back into the kitchen. The staff stood still, watching. He addressed them directly. I came here undercover to understand what this team's been going through. No one should be yelled at for trying to do their job. That ends now, he turned to Marcy. Is there anyone else on this crew who's been stepping up? She nodded slowly. Maya's been covering 2 stations every Saturday, and Paula, she shows up early, stays late, tries harder than anyone. Aidan looked at Paula. She seemed unsure whether to stand taller or disappear. You still want this job? She nodded. Good, because I'm offering you a full-time role with benefits, and we're moving you to a different location, one with a proper mentor. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. You deserve better, he said simply. He turned back to the rest of the team. I'm not here to play hero. I'm here to fix what I allowed to rot. We're bringing in a new manager. We'll review everyone's hours and get support where it's needed. No more shouting. No more fear. He picked up a prep knife and returned to the line. Now let's get through lunch. Together. The next morning, Aidan arrived again, this time not undercover. He wore a crisp black polo with the Ashford hospitality emblem stitched above the heart. The staff who'd worked the evening shift had already heard the news. Word had traveled fast. Dan was gone, Mitch was suspended, and the owner himself was stepping in to stabilize the location. Inside, the air was heavier. Not tense, exactly, but uncertain. Aidan greeted the early crew with a short nod and moved straight to the back, where Marcy was already restocking dry goods. She looked up from the inventory sheet, pausing mid-count. I didn't expect you back this early, she said. I'm not here to observe anymore. I'm here to help, Marcy set the clipboard down. You're not going to replace Mitch, are you? No, but we'll have a temporary GM by next week. Until then, we run this place together. She didn't object, but he could see the hesitation in her posture. Look, I know stepping in like this can feel disruptive, he said. But I'm not here to micromanage. I need your help making this place functional. Marcy folded her arms. You're going to need more than policy changes to do that. I know. She exhaled and walked past him, calling over her shoulder, then let's get to it. By mid-morning, Aidan had a clearer picture of the internal dynamics. The line staff, mostly younger hires, were competent but skittish. They worked fast but not well together. Every station operated like its own island. There were no systems, just habits. And without strong leadership, bad habits had taken root. He spotted Paula quietly reviewing the prep list by the cold station. Her movements were more deliberate than the day before, but she still kept her head low. You've got the most experience with the prep list, right? Aidan asked. Paula hesitated, unsure if it was a trap. I guess. I need you to train the new hire coming in today. She blinked. Me, you've been showing up early, you know the tempo, and you've seen what happens when new hires aren't shown the right way. She looked down at her shoes, then nodded. Okay, her name's Nia. She starts in 20. When Nia arrived, she was quiet but observant. Aidan introduced her to Paula and stepped away, watching from a distance. Paula walked her through the cutting board setup, the knife sanitizing buckets, the portioning scale. She didn't talk much, but her instructions were clear. Nia listened intently and followed every movement. An hour later, Aidan stepped back into the kitchen to check progress. He found the two of them side by side, trimming green beans while discussing different knife grips. "You ever work line before?" Paula asked. "Sandwich shop." "But this is faster. You'll get used to it," Aidan interrupted gently. "How's she doing?" Paula turned. "She's solid, better than I was my first week," he nodded. "Good, I'll be checking in later." He moved to the cashier station where the front-of-house team was prepping for the lunch rush. One of the newer hires, a tall, lanky guy named Marco, was struggling to set the POS system and restock condiments at the same time. "Need a hand?" Aidan asked. Marco looked up. "I'm okay. Just haven't figured out where everything goes yet." Aidan helped him refill the sugar packets and coffee lids, then asked, "Who trained you?" Marco hesitated. "Mitch just told me to watch the others. I kinda picked it up." "No checklist?" "No. Mitch said we didn't need one." Aidan pursed his lips. "We do now. I'll get you one by tomorrow morning." He spent the next 2 hours assembling a basic operating procedure for front-of-house roles. With no formal documentation, the staff had been relying on memory and trial and error. That ended today. By the time the lunch crowd hit, the restaurant was busy but not unmanageable. Aidan worked the expo window, calling out completed orders and cross-checking tickets. Marcy ran the grill. Paula and Nia handled the cold side. Marco rotated between register and drink service. For the first time in weeks, the line held steady without anyone snapping or walking off. Then the door opened, and a man in a company shirt stepped in. Square-shouldered with a clipboard and a defensive look. "Terry from HR," he said, extending a hand. Aidan stepped out from behind the counter, wiping his hands. "Thanks for coming." They retreated to the office, where Terry produced a printout of the complaints filed over the last 6 months. They weren't just about Dan. Several mentioned Marcy, though not by name. Comments about passive-aggressive behavior, supervisors ignoring complaints or brushing off safety issues. Aidan leaned forward. "Show me the earliest complaint." Terry flipped the pages. 4 months ago, from a dishwasher named Jerome. Said his hours were slashed after he asked for a second break. "Is he still employed?" "No, quit after a week." Aidan nodded. "What about the next?" 2 fry cooks reported Dan for yelling. One said he threw a spatula at the wall 2 feet from her. Aidan's jaw tightened. Why wasn't this escalated? They were logged as resolved by Mitch. He claimed they were misunderstandings. Aidan sat back, eyes narrowing. "We never followed up." "No, sir." He closed the folder. "That ends now. Send me the full list and flag any unresolved grievances. Starting Monday, I want every restaurant in this district to have a whistleblower box installed. Anonymous submissions, digital and paper." Terry scribbled notes. "And schedule training for every manager, conflict resolution, de-escalation, and employee rights." "No exceptions." "Yes, sir." When Aidan returned to the front, the rush had slowed. He saw Paula handing off a plate with a quiet confidence he hadn't seen before. Nia stood beside her, plating sides without being told. Marco was laughing with a customer. Marcy was leaning over the grill, wiping it down between batches. Aidan approached. "You've been here the longest, right?" 5 years next month. "I need to ask you something direct." She looked up, wary. "You knew Dan was out of control. Why didn't you step in?" She wiped sweat from her brow. "I tried once. He told me to back off, said Mitch had his back. And you let it go?" "I figured if the GM was okay with it, there wasn't much point." Aidan didn't raise his voice. "You had a point, you just didn't use it." She looked away. "But I'm giving you another chance. If you want to stay, you'll be part of the change. That means no silence, no excuses." Marcy nodded slowly. "Understood. Good, because I need you to train the next floor supervisor, not bark orders, train, teach them what works and what doesn't." She exhaled. "I can do that. I'll hold you to it." He walked back to the line where the team was now prepping for the evening shift. The energy felt different, focused, quietly determined. As Aidan scrubbed down a prep station, he caught Paula watching him from across the kitchen. She gave a small nod, not a thank you, not approval, just recognition. He nodded back once, then returned to scraping down the cutting board. There was still work ahead, rebuilding trust, rewriting protocols, rehiring staff, but today, for the first time, he saw it. Momentum. 3 weeks later, Aidan returned to the same restaurant, but this time, his presence wasn't a secret and the energy in the building had shifted. Not dramatically, not with fanfare, just small, tangible changes, the kind that signaled something deeper had taken root. He stepped through the back entrance in a plain navy button-up and work jeans. No clipboard, no entourage, just a quiet return to the team he'd spent days working beside. Marcy was prepping the grill area, sleeves rolled up, apron already stained. She glanced up when he walked in, her eyes narrowing slightly before she nodded. "You're early." "I figured I'd see how the morning crew's holding up." She placed a tray of marinated chicken on the top shelf of the fridge. "No one's walked out in over 2 weeks, if that tells you anything." He pulled on a pair of gloves, grabbed a cutting board, and started slicing sweet peppers. "Tells me a lot. How's Nia doing?" Picked up fast. "She's already shadowing on the hot side." "Paula's been showing her more each shift." "Good. You think she's ready to run solo?" "Maybe in another week. She still second-guesses her timing." Aidan nodded and kept working. Neither of them spoke for a moment, just the rhythmic sound of knives against boards and the low hum of the refrigerator. Then Marcy said, "I've been rewriting the old line checklists like you asked. Took some of the feedback from the crew. Send me what you've got when you're ready." "I want to make your version standard," she raised an eyebrow. "Even if it's not polished, if it works on the ground, it works. We can polish after." A few minutes later, Paula came through the side door, carrying her backpack and a half-full thermos. She looked more alert than she had during his last visit. Her steps still carried caution but not fear. "Morning," she said. "Hey," Aidan replied. She set her bag down and started washing up. "Nia's running about 10 minutes late. Her bus broke down. She call in?" "Yeah." "She tried walking, but I told her I'd cover until she got here." He held her gaze for a second. "You made the call on your own," she nodded. "Good." That was the purpose of it all, not to create obedience but ownership. By the time the breakfast rush started, the line moved with a quiet confidence. Nia arrived flushed and apologetic, but Paula nodded her over without hesitation and handed off the prep station mid-task. Marco, now with 2 more weeks of experience under his belt, coordinated with the kitchen like a conductor, calling out register holds and allergen alerts with ease. Aidan stepped back and watched without interfering. For the first time since his undercover shift, no one looked over their shoulder before speaking. No one flinched when a mistake happened. They just adjusted and kept moving. Mid-shift, the temporary manager arrived. Her name was Raina, promoted internally from one of the higher-performing stores in the district. She was in her early 40s with a calm but authoritative presence. She didn't raise her voice or dominate the room. She just walked the floor with purpose, checking that timers were set, that food safety logs were filled, and that every station had what it needed. When she passed Aidan at the cold table, she said, "Inventory's clean. I'll send you the weekly report tonight. Any gaps I should know about? Not in product, but we're still light 2 part-timers. I'll need HR to approve 1 more posting." "Done. Forward the request." She gave a short nod and moved on. Later, during the afternoon lull, Aidan pulled Paula aside near the dry storage hallway. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, still in her apron. "You've changed," he said. "I wasn't trying to. That's the point. You're growing into it." She looked at him for a long second. "I didn't think anyone would notice." "I did. So did Marcy. So did Nia." She looked down at her shoes. "I almost quit, before you showed up." "I know." "Why didn't you just fire everyone and start over?" "Because leadership isn't a reset button. It's the willingness to rebuild with what's still standing." "You're still standing." She nodded slowly. He handed her a sealed envelope. "That's your official offer for a team lead position. Higher rate. More hours if you want them. Optional training modules start next month." You'll be paired with a mentor from the flagship location. Paula didn't open it right away. You're serious? I'm not here to bluff, her voice caught slightly. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to be, you just have to show up. You've been doing that since day one. She tucked the envelope into her apron pocket and returned to the line without another word. Aidan stayed through the rest of the shift, helping where he could, observing where he couldn't. Before he left, he found Rena near the mop sink, reviewing the maintenance log. You see anything that worries you? He asked. No, but I'm keeping an eye on the fryer wiring. It's not dangerous yet, but it's old. I'll have facilities inspect it. Anything else? She wiped her hands on a towel. You've got good people here. They just needed someone to believe they were worth keeping. I won't forget that again. The next morning, Aidan met with the district leadership team at headquarters. He walked into the conference room with a single binder and no slides. This is what happens when we stop listening, he said, placing the binder on the table. And this is what happens when we start again. He laid out the changes made at the restaurant: clear training paths, anonymous reporting systems, revised leadership expectations, and made one thing clear. No one advances in this company unless they know how to lead without shouting. By the end of the meeting, 3 underperforming managers were scheduled for review. 2 more were placed on probation for failing to respond to employee reports. HR was instructed to audit every location's feedback log and follow up with every unresolved complaint. Aidan didn't walk out of that room proud. He walked out accountable. Back at the restaurant, the team continued their rhythm. Orders were filled, customers served, and no one raised their voice. Paula trained Nia on closing procedures. Marco handled a refund with calm professionalism. Marcy reviewed the new inventory charts. Rena stayed until the last pan was scrubbed, and Dan. He never came back. Aidan didn't need to see fireworks or hear applause. The only thing he needed was what he saw as he drove past that red brick building one final time that week. Lights on, line moving, and no one afraid to speak.